Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of High Vibe Monday. This is Ange de Lumière, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a spiritual lawyer and an intuitive business strategist, and I work with female entrepreneurs or aspiring female entrepreneurs who have a big vision for their work and who would like to learn how to implement it, have the confidence to do that, and more importantly, to make it happen in an almost effortless way and in a very fulfilling way with as little stress as possible. And they're open to the idea that intuition can help them do that because in my own experience as a visionary, you are not likely to walk down the path that other people have, and so your intuition is incredibly important to show you the way to your big vision, because you're not likely to see someone else's path that you can follow to lead to your big vision. So, and today we're going to talk about time, how to find the time to manifest and implement that big vision. I'm starting with myself because I've always had this issue with time. Probably from the moment I became a mother, and that was in the first time in 1995, so that's quite a long time. And I always felt there's not enough hours in the day to do everything that I wanted to do, because I had a thriving career as an international business lawyer. And I had this child, I had lots of friends, I loved reading books, I loved going to the cinema, I loved going out. And I couldn't see how I could continue to do all of these things as well as being a mother and being there for my son. And it didn't stop because I had more responsibilities in my job, and I traveled the world actually, first all over the world. I went to Chile, don't know if I pronounce it. I'm French, so I don't always pronounce word rightly, and then people wonder what I'm saying. I went to South America, like Chile, Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil. I went to Central America. I went to the US to negotiate big deals. I went to Africa. I went to Asia, including Japan. The only place I haven't been, well, there's lots of countries obviously, but the only continent I haven't been is Australia, and I can't wait for the day that I'm called to go there. I have a feeling it's going to be around a book launch of mine, but I'm just, So I cannot count the number of times when I said to myself, I don't have the time, and that I've been proven wrong. So I will give you one example. I had this urge to write a book when I had probably, how many children did I have back then? 3. I think I wrote my first book in English when I had a small child and 2 elder children, so 3 children. And I honestly didn't know how I was going to find the time to write that book, but I had such an urge to do it. And this is actually where we need to explore the idea that when we have an urge, when it is important enough for us, when it's a priority, we actually create time. But I've always said I don't have the time for this, I don't have the time for that, and then the universe has proven me wrong. So I've written like 4 books in that year with a very small baby not baby, he was 1 or 2 I think, or 3 maybe, but who woke up super early, and I don't know, I just did it in my bed on my iPad, and this is where my writing space before he woke up. So there's always a way to find the time, but sometimes our mind comes in the way, our beliefs that we don't have enough time comes in the way. The truth is we always have more time than we think we do. It's a bit like the food. Because we use it mindlessly, time, we tend to waste it. So the very first step to have more time is to be more mindful of how you spend your time. And I'm reminded of the time when I worked in a law firm in the first 2 years of my careers, where we had timesheets. We had to fill it in because obviously we invoiced our clients by the hour of how many hours we spent on a file. And so it was quite easy to record our time and to track how many hours we were working. And I think that's a really good practice to become aware, just like when you go, on a slimming course or something, they very often recommend you to have a food diary to see how you consume food, because we can forget what we've spent, what we've eaten. And it's the same thing with time. We can forget how we spent time, especially if we waste it, because we have this denial thing going on, that we do things that we don't really feel we should be doing, and so we tend to blank it out. It doesn't count. I don't know how it happens in the diets, but people say, oh, this one doesn't count, and I don't know why. And we do the same with time. We tend to forget, and this way, if we don't remember it, then it's never happened. Does that make sense? So there's several aspects to the time element that are not, because we have been brought up to think that time is really a linear thing, that it happens, that it's always measured by the same increment, that it's tied to a clock. But there's other cultures where there are no clock, and it's only the now that counts, and they work more intuitively. So then they feel that when the time is to do certain things, then they go and do these things, which it's particularly the case in Africa, for example, and I know it drives Westerners who live there absolutely nuts. But I think we can benefit from inspiring ourselves from these cultures, because in a way you learn to bend time. Okay, so time has several aspects. We can be wasting time because we have poor boundaries, or because we stress, and I'm going to look into it in both aspects, one after the other. Let's start with the poor boundaries. Sometimes we are not brave enough or courageous enough to say no to something that is asked of us or presented to us, or something that we're sucked into. I'm going to put it that way, because of several aspects. Okay, and that's why learning to say no in order to master time is one of the most important skills. That's the first aspect. So why do we find it so difficult to say no? There could be a fear of missing out, and I'm going to give you an example that's really silly. I still laugh at myself for this, but when I first got onto social media, especially Twitter and Facebook, they're quite addictive. I was actually afraid that I was going to miss out on what people posted if I wasn't there all the time, which means that I totally went into the addiction to social media, being there all the time to make sure I didn't miss out on something. And it took me years to come to the point where I could see that if I felt the impulse to go on social media, then that was the right time to go on there. And usually I saw something that was important for me to see, and that completely turned things around. I went from fear to inspiration, and it changed everything. So that's the first aspect of that poor boundaries, is that we have a fear of missing out, so we just do everything. And in business it can happen as well. If we're not confident, if we're not secure, if we don't have a plan, and these are all the things that I've been working on my business in the past 3 to 4 years when I took it online, and I had to tighten up all the bolts and everything to make my business work. If we have all these things going on, then we'll be constantly distracted, because we'll think, oh, there's this thing, it's going to sort out my business, it's going to make me do this, it's going to make me have more clients. When it's not necessarily going to do it, but because we swap and change all the time in the fear of missing out, we scatter our energies and we waste our time. So it's really important to focus our energies in business in revenue making activities. And it doesn't mean that we sell all the time. There's several things, but it's to have that strategy, short term and long term, and to really tighten all these aspects. And that's something that's taken me a long time, and I have seen the impact that this has and how powerful it is. In fact, over the weekend I finished my 90-day plan, because Sundays are my CEO days, and so yesterday I finalized my 90-day plan, and it was just amazing, the clarity that it gave me and the focus, And focus is really important. It doesn't matter how many hours in the day you have. If you're not focused, you won't achieve anything. And I tend to be easily distracted. We had this conversation with my husband over the weekend because he said this and he said that, and he didn't understand why I had to do things a certain way. We have like lists of expenses that link to different things, and he said, well, why don't you just put it all in one thing? And I said no, because for me, I'm easily distracted, and if things are not structured, then I tend to fizzle. And that's, I don't know if I'm the only person like that, but that's really helped me for me. The second aspect is not fear of missing out, it's people pleasing. So you're afraid that people are not going to like you if you don't say yes to something. You're afraid to really say, to want to be selfish and say, no, I want to do this, and this has got to come my priority. This was the case for my business as well, because I'm the mother of 4 kids on the spectrum, and my kids mean the world to me. In the beginning of my business, I would always put their needs above my business. So if I was doing something like that, it was actually very difficult to organize anything like this or a podcast, because I would be interrupted constantly, because there was always something that they needed. But I thought, because for many years I couldn't put my kids first because of my international career, I went the other way around. You know how you tend to go on a pendulum, on a spectrum? So I went from having time for my children only when I came home late from my job as a lawyer, to wanting to do as much as I could for my children, but I didn't have that balance. And I had to redress that balance and make sure that I would stop being such a people's pleaser. And it was not just only for my kids, it was my friends, my family, everyone. If people said to me, do you want to do this or that, I would always say yes. Also because I like to make people happy, but I was forgetting myself in the equation. So I had to learn to stop pleasing people all the time. And I need to say, I lost friends over this, because people had such habits of, oh yeah, Ange will do anything for you. If you ask her, she's always there for you. You know, like the ideal friend. But is that really an ideal friend, or is it just someone who pleases everyone? So I had to learn that. Maybe you will have to learn that, to have the time for the things that matter to you. And people are going to call you selfish, but the funny thing is, they're the ones being selfish because they're not happy that you don't do what they want. So who's being selfish, really? Everybody needs to be a little bit selfish so that they look after the things that are important to them. And my big vision is super important. So I've learned to set those boundaries. Now I work Mondays. I don't work a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there when people allow me to have the time. And it's actually one of my mentors who's helped me to do that. And it was extremely difficult. It took up to 2 years for me to really put that structure in, that people actually apologize for walking into my office on a Monday. And I mean, people, my family. And now they do. And even my husband, who's usually, it's like if he's there and he has a questions, I just have to be there for him. Now he's learning. So that's the people pleasing aspect. The other aspect is to want to please everyone. It's a slightly, want to help everyone. It's a slightly different shade of the people pleaser, but it's just as perversive. Is that the word I'm looking for? So that means that, you want people to be happy around you. And I certainly do. There's nothing that makes me more happy than other people happy around me. But you have to understand that actually their happiness doesn't depend on you. It depends on them. And if you think that you're here to make everyone happy, you're actually disempowering other people. You're enabling them. They depend on you for their happiness. And maybe that's what you want, because you want to feel that you matter. You want to feel that you're important to other people. But you're paying such a high cost for that I'm inviting you to reflect on this and to see if there's not a sort of addiction and a lack of self-worth underneath all that, where you get all your self-worth from other people by being the one that makes them happy. Whereas this is actually not sustainable. Because you'll start becoming resentful, and I did that a lot. I have so many people who went grateful for the help that I gave them. And I didn't do it for them to be grateful, but because I attracted more and more people that were in that kind, that just took and give very little. I came to the point of depletion, and it was a vicious circle. So I had to kind of, this is just still boundaries, is to understand that it's very important to have your boundaries, because you're the master of your time. But if you make others the master of your time, then you'll never have the time for anything that you want. Does that make sense? It ties in with the next aspect of being difficult to say no, and that's when we put ourselves last. And this is particularly true for mothers that are supposed to be all loving and all self-effacing and that don't have any needs. Actually, it doesn't make for a good mother, because she will become depleted, she will become resentful, snappy, her needs won't be met, and that's a poor example for their children as well, because they'll tend to do the same, and you create generations of frustrated, resentful and unhappy people. So there's a fine balance between putting yourself first all the time and putting other people's first all the time, and it's important to do that. It's a give and take, but it has to be a balance. It can't be you giving and then collapsing and getting into burnout, because that's also a danger. There's another aspect when we don't say no to activities that numb us, like, mindless Facebook scrolling, watching TV, listening to an interesting conversation just because we're curious or nosy, that sort of thing. Netflixing for hours and binging on films that distract us, this whole entertainment society. That's also something that these activities are time, I don't know what the word, there's a word, necrophage, I think it's called, I'm not sure. Basically, they can literally take over your entire life. There's so much to watch on TV. You could spend your entire day on there, or you could Facebook is the same. You could spend your entire day on Facebook and never be bored. But that's like an escapism. It's poor boundaries, because then what do? You don't do anything else than that. So that's when you can claw back some of the time by having the discipline to say, for example, okay, I'm going to watch one episode and then I'll go back to doing what I want to do, like maybe tidy your house if you think you never have the time to tidy your house, or work on your business, or be more efficient. And I need to say that this boundary thing is also in business, is having a clear plan. And this has completely changed my life, and I've shared twice on this podcast about the beauty of planning. I've interviewed Heather Robinson twice, and I need to say that the last year, 2019, and this year, I'm taking my planning to another level, and it's completely changed things for me. It's created more time when I thought I didn't have the time. And at first, when I was shown that I needed to create a podcast, and that was 2 to 3 years ago, I was like, no way, I don't have the time. No one who works one day a week has time for a podcast. But I had to turn this around, and now I couldn't think of my business without a podcast. I love making these episodes. I love inspiring people. And this is an activity that grows my business, because it reaches to audiences that I would normally not reach to, and it's good for my business. It's good also for my business as an author, because someone who has a podcast is much more attractive as an author to a publisher, all that sort of thing. So this is, when you choose an activity, you have to be strategic, and that's the opposite of having poor boundaries. So that was one big aspect of time, but there's another one which is really, really cool, and that's what I called Einstein time. And you've probably heard of it, but I want to go in depth into it so you really understand what this means. So once you've sorted out your boundaries, there's no point getting into Einstein time before you sort your boundaries. So go through that FOMO, that people pleasing, that wanting to help everyone, putting yourself last, and time wasting. Clean all of that up, and then move on to level 2, which is Einstein time. So basically, the idea behind Einstein time is very simple. It's that the more stressed you are about time, the more time shrinks. So let's give an example. Or the more bored as well. It's the other two aspects. So if you think constantly you don't have the time, then it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the time seems to go at light speed. Sorry, I mentioned boredom, but that's the opposite actually. So you need to start working on your belief that you don't have enough time, and you need to work on the aspects of well-being such as sleep, stress, and lifestyle, so that you can get to that space where you become, how can I say this? I want to find the right words. Time responsible, or mastering time, which is it takes a long time to master time. That sounds like a conundrum, but I want to read a quote at this point that comes from the Zen practice, and I did actually Zen meditation for a whole year when I was pregnant with my second child, and I think Zen is interesting in it. Like, challenges the way you look at things. And the quote I want to say is that you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should sit for an hour. And that doesn't seem logical, because you're like, what? 1 hour if I don't have the time? Well, there's so much wisdom in there. And this happened to me last week, actually. I came to a point on one day where I had overcrowded myself. I had a to-do list in my business that was so long, I only managed to tick one or two. And it's because I thought I had to do all these things now, and that stemmed from the belief that I don't have enough time, that I'm in a hurry, that things are not working out for me, that somehow I'm missing out on something. And so I overcrowded myself, and the result was I didn't finish it, and I doubled up on my belief that there's not enough time. So what I did is I looked at that to-do list, and I decided what gets done gets done. What doesn't get done doesn't get done. I stuck to the time that I had allocated on my business that day, and then I closed the book, and I went away and went into my homeschooling day, which is every day except Monday. You would not believe the relief that I felt at doing that, because I realized that I had created this problem for myself from nowhere. And the reason I had done that is because I believed I had to do all the things, which is something very common in business. You know, there's a really big difference between being busy and being efficient. Now, being efficient means you're strategic with the things that you do. But we're being busy, we can all be busy. For me, busy is not... And yet, you know, I don't know if you remember, well, I remember from my days when I was in a law firm or as a lawyer, being busy was supposed to be good. You know, people, if you spent 12 hours in the office, you were better than those who spent 7 hours. But for me, from the moment I had children, this mentality would not work for me anymore, because I had to be home to pick up my children from the childminder or school or whatever it was. So this whole world of I'm more busy than you are, and this competition to how many hours in work could you put, which is, I think, ridiculous. But that's a very true culture in a lot of jobs. And the moment you become a mother, I'm sorry to say, but I don't think fathers are impacted by this as much, because somehow, if the two have professions, at least that's how it happened with my first husband, I was still the one that had to go and pick up a child that was sick rather than my husband, or take them to the doctors or anything. And back in France, I had a support system. I had grandmothers and everything. Once I moved to the UK, that was gone. So I was a solo mother with my 2 young children. And so I had to become more efficient rather than busy. But that doesn't, it was almost like in the corporate world, if you do things in 7 hours that you could do in 12 hours, then what happens is they give you more work instead of praising you for being more efficient. So there's this really crazy world where we live, where we constantly make ourselves busy to, especially if we work for someone else, to impress people and to get the promotion or to get the pay rise. Whereas really, it should always be about being more efficient. But that's not a culture that I have seen. And also the culture should be about you being rested and have enough time for creativity. And that's something that actually I discovered in my job, that when I joined Orange in the UK, which is how I moved from Paris to the UK, they had a room that they called the Imaginarium, where people could just go and lie on beanbags to relax and get into their creative zone. I thought this was a revolution. They even had walls with bubbles that went up and down on glass walls in that room, just to kind of relax you and everything. And it really stuck in my mind as something that if I one day create a company, which might not happen, this is definitely the kind of spirit that I'd like to impart. And actually, I'm more likely to create a school than a business, because I home educate and I have visions for a revolution in the way we raise our children, and we support their learning. And I can really see an Imaginarium for children that they could go into if they want to be in that creative and relaxed zone. So that was a little bit of a meander in our discussion, but I think it's really important to realize why we keep busy rather than efficient, and why it's okay to actually work fewer hours, but to be really focused, and then to have time for other things that people don't consider as important, such as hobbies and friends and activity that nourish the soul, painting, making things with our hands, gardening. This is so important, because then we can go back to work with a refreshed mind and this zest and this really focused energy. Whereas when we just keep busy, we become mindless, and I don't think it works as well. Now, the concept of Einstein time, he expressed it in a quote that I found, which is so powerful. It's that he said, if you sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, it seems like 2 minutes. Whereas if you sit on a hot stove for 2 minutes, it feels like 2 hours. That's relativity. Now, I don't know about you, but I love this way of putting things, because it is important to understand that time is completely relative. It actually doesn't really exist. It's what you make of it. When I work in my business, I do not see time go by, because I'm in my zone of genius, and I love it so much that I can do something in a span of time that most people would think is impossible. For example, this podcast. As I say, I only have Monday to work in my business, to see clients, to create content, to do all sorts of things. And so I didn't think I would have the time to do the podcast as well. But because I only allocate myself 1 hour to do the podcast, and that includes putting notes together so that I can talk to you like I do right now on video and in audio, then I just put it through Audacity. I very little edit it. I used, at some point I took the and out, but I don't anymore. So all I do is take the spikes out, and if I cough, and then I move on and I just post it. Then I write the show notes. The show notes takes a little bit more days, so it's probably more like an hour and 15 minutes to do it. But that's it. That's the time I've allocated for my podcast, and I've managed, I think today is the 60th episode, which yay, I want to celebrate that. So but if I took, it's the Parkinson's law as well, is that the more time you allocate to something, the more time you're going to take. So if I had a whole day to do my podcast, I'd probably polish the sound so much that it would sound amazing. I would have a backdrop, I would have this and that, I would cut out all the places where I hesitate, all that sort of thing. I don't know what I would do with the show notes, but I could spend the whole day on it, and I would still not feel satisfied if I let my perfectionist step in. So you see that time is actually about boundaries, it's about beliefs, it's about perfectionism or not. Isn't that amazing to think that time is actually all this and not just a hand on a clock that ticks like this? Yeah. So if we know this to be true, the thing that if we sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, it feels like 2 minutes. And if we sit on a hot stove, 2 minutes feels like 2 hours. How can we change our life so that on our business, so that time flies, but at the same time we do what we need to do in our business to be efficient rather than busy. Well, for me, there needs to be 3 things that tie in together. There needs to be a plan, there needs to be a structure, and there needs to be a clear vision. And I can help you on all these 3 aspects so that you can function in your zone of genius, that you never feel that time is going slow and all that, or the opposite, that you're always busy and you never get to do the things that you really want to do or get the results that you want. You might be super busy and you think, oh my God, I've put all this time in it and I have so little results. This is not fair. I work so hard and I don't get the results that other people do. Well, maybe it's time to change the way you do business. Have those clear boundaries. Work on your beliefs and your mindset around time. There's probably not a day that I don't work on my mindset around time, honestly. And I find that if I relax and if I trust I'll have the time to do the things that are important, the other thing that happens is that the things that are not important that I've put in my diary literally vanish. Either I've had coffee dates where people have said to me, I'm sorry, I can't make it anymore. And in the old world, I would get annoyed and thinking, oh my God, they don't respect me, they've just cancelled. But now I'm like, probably this wasn't necessary today. Probably this wasn't important and I needed to focus on something else. So I asked myself, what do I need to focus on? Now that I have this whole hour that's been actually scheduled for me. And this happened actually in an interesting way today. Today I was supposed to do 2 Q&A calls for the group program that I've run since Christmas called the first 8 weeks of the Slim Soul. And nobody signed up for them. And instead of getting upset, I was like, oh, this has created actually 2 hours in my day on Monday that I have free to actually progress something. What am I supposed to progress? And I felt really grateful for no one signing up. And I gave them more time. I decided, okay, we're going to reschedule it for beginning of March so you have time to catch up with all the modules. And then you have some real questions. And I'm going to, support them in these weeks by posting in the group and suggesting, where are you at? Share with me what modules have you done, what questions do you have, and all that. So this is how I would like you to approach time and perhaps put out to the universe to help you prioritize your time by doing half the work, okay? You do the work by working on your beliefs, on peeling off all those layers, from people expecting you to be busy, trying to impress your boss or whoever it is. And we carry these beliefs into our business when we become entrepreneurs because we're almost worse bosses than we were, than maybe our bosses were when we were employed, if you have ever been employed. So we want to focus on these clear boundaries, as I said, a plan, a structure, and a vision. And initially, I resisted all these because I'm a creative. I like to reinvent the wheel every day. In my job as a lawyer, they would always put me on contracts I'd never done, that no one else had done before. And I would just wipe it up together, and then I'll once when the thing was created, I'd move on and give it to someone else. But in business, it doesn't work. You want to create something and then you want to rinse and repeat, so that you can create that momentum and you can create an awareness on the market that this is what you do. Does that make any sense? So I want you to start also relaxing about having enough time for everything, okay? I'm going to give you a last example, which was really precious. I did an exercise where I listed all my fears about being successful. One of those fears is that I wouldn't have time for my children, my husband, and my friends. And I was like, yeah, I still have this fear in me. So what do I do about it? And the universe actually answered to me in the most beautiful way by showing me that actually either my clients can become friends or friends can become clients. And literally it sent one of my friends that I hadn't had time to see in years. She asked to have a coffee date with me and we ended up working together. And she said, I want to work with you. And she's going to, come back to me very soon about this, the VIP package. She wants to work with me. And that was the way the universe showed me that, of course, I can still see my friends by being successful. All I need to do is either work with my friends, and that's absolutely possible in my world because I don't know about you, but I'm quite detached. I'm able to be really neutral even with the people I love. And probably it's because I see people through the eyes of angels. And so, yeah, I love actually working with friends. I've had three friends who have worked with me a long term, and I've also made friends for my VIPs that I absolutely cherish. So this actually showed me that my fear of not having time to see my friends if I became successful, or to the level that I want to be, wasn't an unfounded fear. Does that make sense? So I want you to use the mantra, there's always enough time. I always have enough time for the things that matter. Okay? So, and from here, if you want to work with me so that I can help you structure your time so that you're more focused, so that you're that you're efficient rather than busy, I would love to work with you. I would love to help you make that big vision happen in your world, because the problem, and that's what Stephen Covey expressed in his book, the 7 Habits of the Efficient People, I think those successful people, is that if you're busy, you will constantly tend to the urgent and non-important, or to the non-important and urgent, whatever it is, but you will never care for that. He has it's a 4-part square, and I think I'm going to share this graphic, because I've made one for my business, where you will not do the important things that are not urgent, because something will always come in the way. So it's really important to know what your long-term priority is, how to make it happen by scheduling time for this big vision, even if it's only 15 to 20 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a long time, or even if it's only 1 hour a week. Let's get the example of writing a book. I've written so many books, and it's been done by having the discipline to work on it 15 to 20 minutes a day. But I had a plan, I knew what I was working on, and all I needed to do then is just roll it out. Does that make any sense? So I want to thank you for watching this video or listening to this podcast. I will be with you again next week. It's not going to be on Monday though. It's going to be on Tuesday, because I have some health appointments for my son on Monday. So I've decided to swap days when I work. So Have Vibe Monday will be on a Tuesday next week. I hope you'll forgive me, but I will have an incredible interview with Tamala Ridge on how detox can impact your bottom line in a positive way. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you next week now. Bye for now.